Hi, this is just an introduction to watercolors. The first thing I want to talk to you about is the type of watercolors. There's all kinds. For instance, this is my favorite. This is koi watercolors. It comes in a container like this. And these look little, but I've been using them for quite a while. And they're very intense. You can also buy maybe just a single color. I love gold, so this is a metallic gold that I bought. But you can also use the children's watercolor. This I found at Target. This is something new. I found it was very much like gelatos, but it was at Target. They're called watercolor creams, a lot like gelatos and distressed crayons. This is gouache, which is very much like watercolors, except it's opaque. Now, you can go to Michael's and get watercolor in a little tube just like this. You'll like it. It's very expensive. Inexpensive, I'm sorry. And you can give it a try to see if you like it. Here's what they look like. They're just little, they're intense, and you can try it out and see if you like them. You can also get watercolor crayons. Now, watercolor crayons are a lot different than just plain watercolors. You can take the brush and just wet it like this and use it, or you can wet it, or you can wet it and then put it down. I find this sometimes leaves marks, so I don't really particularly like it that way. I really prefer doing it this way. Or coloring on your mat and then adding water and doing it. I like that. That works for me. But either way, you also have the distress crayons, which are a watercolor crayon that you use very much like just regular color crayons. You also have, these are really good if you like watercolor crayons. They aren't my favorite, but I'm learning how to use them since I have quite a few. Then you can get these. I love these. These are Pearlistic. They were only like $5. However, there's very little paint in each one of these, but they really add to your picture. A lot of times I use this after I've drawn something to sort of give it a little glare. And let me show you some brushes. This is what I like the best. This is a watercolor brush. You put the water in the brush, and they can come with all kinds of different tips. You can get a large tip that you might want to do for backgrounds, and you can mess it up by putting the tip on wrong, as I did. I prefer the smaller tips. I seem to have more control over those. This is another one that's different. What you do is you put the water in here, which makes it great for traveling, because like you don't necessarily want a pitcher of water wherever you are, but you can always pull out one of these. Okay, when it comes to brushes, I used to not look at the numbers on the brush. That's huge. I prefer the 4 and the 6, but if you notice, the thicker, this is what number is this? This is a number 8. 8 is great if you're going to just do a background because it holds more water. The thinner it is, the less water it's going to hold and the more detail you can do. For instance, this one is the one I use for details. It is a number 1. if you notice, it's long, but it has very, very thin. So it can hold a lot of water, but it only lets a little let out at a time, depending on how much pressure you put on it. Okay, now I want to talk about the type of paper also. You're going to want to probably get some of the cheaper paper for practicing and learning. A Strathmore I thought was expensive paper, but no, that's the cheaper practice paper. And that's all I've used. You get two kinds of watercolor paper. You get hot and you get cold. The hot watercolor paper is going to be very smooth. It has no teeth and it dries really quickly. It's really good if you're going to do a large wash, or if you're going to do a portrait, or you're going to do little small details. I usually use the cold, and that's what you're going to see a lot of when you go in the store. It looks kind of bumpy. It is a slight texture on one side, and some of it is textured on both sides, but this is kind of smooth on one side and a little more texture on the other side. The best paper is supposed to be Arches. It's the professional watercolor paper. It's pricey, and I'm not there yet. So I wanted to show you some different ways to watercolor, and I'm going to use my koi. Now, I used to wonder what these are, especially when you have children's palettes and stuff where they open. And this refuses to open. Okay, this side actually is where you're going to mix your paints. I'm going to put them over here and mix them. And if they dry, it's okay, because all you have to do is add water and they're good again. So the first thing I'm going to do is called, let me write it out for you. It's called Wet on Wet. Wet on Wet bleeds really good. And let's say the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to wet with clear water my area. And then I'm going to drop color in. What I'm going to do is just drop it in. And you'll notice it bleeds. If you do wet on wet, it's going to bleed into the other colors or into the shape. If you want to control the shape, this is a good way to control it. Okay, so the other way is using a dry brush. It's going to have to be wet to a certain extent, but you're going to want to make it as dry as possible. And get your color. Let's do a different color now. And you're going to dry brush it. This isn't going to go as quickly because it's dry, but you're going to get more pigment. I prefer this method because you have a little more control over where the paint goes. So this is called dry brush. You can also do what they call graduated colors. You take a color, especially if you have more than one color. Let's take this color and I'm going to paint it. It's a dark orange, and then I'm going to add another color right under it. Sort of blend it, but not. You're going to blend it where it meets. Then you're going to take the next color and just blend it in a little bit where they meet. And as you see, and as it dries, you can go back in and add more color in the areas so they're more pronounced. The next thing you can do is called a resist. And a resist is when you take a crayon, you take some masking tape, you take Vaseline, you take some glue, you can even use rubber cement, anything to resist it. And you would just, we did that as crayons. You would color an area and then paint over it, and the paint will not go where the crayon is. It's cool when you're doing it with Vaseline or masking fluid. Also, you can do what they call graffiti, which is where you put the color down. Put some nice color in there, let it dry a minute, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take a needle or something sharp. I have a pen right here, and we're going to scratch into it, making marks. That comes out really cool sometimes if you want to add something different in your watercolors. Also, you can use rubbing alcohol, and it will do like salt and things. It will change it. Then we're going to do what we call lifting off. Let's do something green where you can see it really well. I'm going to put a lot of it down here and go, oops, I put too much. Then I'm going to take a paper towel and especially if I like put too much water in an area and I go, ugh, I don't want that much water there, or I don't want it to bleed, you just sort of dab it and it's going to come up. And you can almost get all of it up if you want it all up. But it's the one thing that you kind of helps you correct mistakes. And especially if you want to do clouds or something, you're going to do a lifting up. So I'm just going to lift some of it and leave some of it. So, and if I was you, I would twist the paper towel so I had more control over how much I get up. Also, there's color blending. Let's say I'm going to color blend something else with the green. You need to make sure that you're working in the same on the color wheel. And I'm just going to blend the two of them together. A little bit more of a dry brush and just blend them in together. I might take some of this green, go back, make this a little stronger, so that they sort of look like one continuous color. You can also use them for stamping. So I have this little butterfly, and let's say you can do this with acrylics as well. I want to use this. Usually what I use is just a regular children's marker. Just make sure it's wet. Well, let's see how this does. Make sure there's enough paint on the stamp. You don't want it to get dry. And it's going to have a nice kind of wet watercolored look. It's not going to come out like you would if you used a stamp pad. You can also use a straw and blow. That's really cool. Especially if you want to draw hair or something. That's really cool. Then my favorite thing to do is glazing, which I usually do with my jelly plate. And if I can find my gold, I'll show you how I do that. Well, I will use this then. A glazing is just a light coloring of a certain color. Let's say I usually glaze with a light gold. Just put it over the top. It gives it a nice color. See how that has a nice shine to it? It's called a glaze. You want to do that after you're finished all your drawing. You want to put a sort of a glaze seal on the top of it after it's nice and dry. Ooh, let me do that with my butterfly. Oh, that makes it nice and pretty. Okay, that's it for the introduction. Hope you have a good day. May God bless, and may your days be good, blessed with good things. Just when you ask, you must believe, and you cannot doubt, because one who doubts is like the wave of the sea, blown and tossed about. James 1:6.